Chapter 65 Meeting Guabacoan again. In the back garden of the king of Jing County's residence. Thinking that the two families were familiar with each other, the prince asked Fan Xian to make himself at home, and then went to attend to the other guests. After all, there were a few eye-catching characters here today. Fan Xian, however, did not know the undercurrent of today's calm wave, walking casually in the seemingly scattered seats, to find in line with their own temperament of the secluded place, sat down, saw a few on the table with wine, very consciously poured a cup, a small sip. Seeing no white men around, the conversation must quote the scriptures. Fan Xian heart's eyes looked up at the sky, and secretly said that fortunately today the sun is not too poisonous, or what this laborious poetry will not see beautiful women, but also to listen to sour words, and then by the sun a bake, really want to become a vinegar-frying air-dried chicken. Scholars seemed to sit casually, in fact, all around the square on the grass in the center of the small table, so not many people noticed him on the side. A few of the aristocrats leaning against his side saw that he looked new to them, but was personally led in by the sun, so they curiously went up and saluted, ready to get some background. Which is expected to Fan Xian smile. Words are seamless, ahuhaha half a day. Those people still do not know this beautiful young man is the son of whose family. Chat for a few sentences cannot help but feel a little boring, so each back away, waiting for the poetry will open. That said, this day is not compared to the previous days. The sunlight is gentle, willow fluttering. The spring breeze can be sprinkled to the collar of the people drilling hard. The wind of spring, of course, there is nothing cold force. Like invisible small hand gently moving, very comfortable, is a good time to sleep. Fan Xian was not a prodigal maniac, so at first he still piled up a smiling face and kept his eyes open, listening to the poems and words on the stage and watching the wine and chips on the table, but he was blown by the spring wind and exposed to the sun, and felt that the poetry meeting was really boring, so he felt that his head was gradually drowsy and was about to go to sleep. I only vaguely heard a few lines, such as I dreamed of Lijo Road, and I came here again. It must not be the mountain man asking for high prices, sometimes laugh at themselves, and there is a wine cup thick, a gourd * drunken Lu Wang, a gourd of wine pressure flour tops heavy. There is also the characters of the Eastern barbarians have all drifted away, but there is a man who is still old and mature. Fan Xian secretly pinched his tiger's mouth, let himself sober up some, although he is not very fond of poetry, but in this kind of occasion, cannot show 16 years has not yet been washed clean the disposition of the previous life, so he smiled, but a little woodenly looked toward the field. When he looked, he saw a few half-familiar characters, who were sitting in the most comfortable seats by the lake, and they were Guabacoan, He's Own Way, and their group, who had clashed in the restaurant the day before. Fan Xian frowned slightly, thinking to himself that Prince Jing County clearly knew about the dispute of wills between the Fan house and the Gua family that day, so why did he call over both sides today? Seems to feel his gaze is across a lake, to the opposite side of the beautiful people to show their own calm and steady style of Guabacoan turned his head. A look is the Fan family that make black fist, face changed, no longer able to maintain elegant style. Subconsciously hand is waving the folding fan thrown on the table. There is a student in the field in the explanation of the scriptures, so not many people noticed Gua Shangshu's son had such a reaction. Those who were at the same table with Guabacoan followed his gaze, and immediately found Fan Xian hiding in a remote place, and all of them changed their colors, thinking that they were readers with full bellies, and they didn't bring any guards with them today. So if that Fanfu kid made another black fist, who would go up to block it? Fan Xian looked at them with a smile and nodded, greeting them as if they were friends. That table of people whispered to discuss something. Face gradually showed a slightly gloomy smile, always gloomy Guabacoan face, but more than a few points of pleasure, only that his own way seems to be a face of disbelief. I don't know what the girls under the white amman on the other side of the lake are doing, but there is a female historian in the house who keeps transcribing the poems made by the women on the other side and sends them to this side for the talented people to comment on. The son laughed aloud and said, although it is said that women are not inferior to men, but the way of literature is not comparable to the fight of brute strength. All of you don't have to be polite, you can't lose to those weak women. The crowd said yes in unison, laughter gradually, then someone idea to something as the theme, make a poem, choose the best three, and the opposite bank, and Guabacuin that table a scholar eyeballs a turn, arching his hand and said, I'm not talented, I do not know how to think of the lake as the subject. Excellent, today's blue wave floating gold, someone to do the support. Extremely, look at the lake and mountains. Someone to do Zhuang. Guabacuin's eyes turned, looked at Fan Xian, and said in a loud voice, I didn't realize that young Master Fan was here today, so why don't we start this round with young Master Fan? Fan Xian had come here today on his father's orders, to show off in front of the people of Kyoto, and when he heard that he was to compose a poem, he smiled and shook his head. I don't have that kind of skill, so I'd rather you all please do so. See him back down, Guabacuin more and more feel that the other party is really an embroidered pillow, said with a sneer. The day before yesterday, Brother Fan in a stone residence in the high talk, will be the world's talent in the eyes of the whole. Today a C is actually stingy teaching. It seems that the eye is really very high. Hearing him say so, the crowd realized that the original two sides have suspicion. This is a poem to seek provocation. Most of the guests in the residence were guests of King Jing's residence, and although they didn't know who Fan Xian was, they saw that he seemed to be acquainted with the son, so some of them guessed whether he was a member of the Fan clan or not, but not many of them guessed that he was the son of Uncle Fan Jian of the Sinan clan. Seeing the people talking, Guabacuin took a sip of tea and smiled grimly. This Fan is the one who recently entered the capital. You should have heard of him. The crowd was not stupid, and immediately realized Fan Xian's identity, and looked at him with more than a hint of pity, a hint of disdain, and a lot of complex emotions. Fan Xian's face remained unchanged, still wearing a light smile, but he insisted on refusing to compose a poem. Prince Jing looked at the smile on his face, more and more unable to see the depth of this sun. Pupils of his eyes flashed a trace of color, rounded off the scene, and said, Poetry and the poetic meaning, Fan Sherbei has no intention of doing so today. All of you should recite it on your own. Fan Xian leaned lazily on the slanting table and watched the people in the field, listening to each other's lackluster sentences, very boring. This appearance fell in the eyes of others, but some wanton, cannot help but someone sneer. Fan family Miss Poetry and Literature is famous in Kyoto Sage. I do not expect the young master of the Fan family is a separate silent speech road. Is really surprising. Guabacuin lowered his voice and laughed. After all, it is not raised in the house, of course, to be different. Although he lowered his voice, but in fact still deliberately let the people around him to listen to understand. Qing country, although the culture is open, but the identity of illegitimate children, after all, cannot be on the stage. And Fan Xian's identity is even more sensitive. Listen to him deliberately say so. For a time, the field filled with a strange flavor.